What's going on, YouTube? It's Big Brother 749 coming back at you with another video. I've been watching the news these past couple of days, and I've been seeing where it's been announced that Derek Chauvin, that rotten piece of shit, the former cop from Minneapolis that killed George Floyd back in 2020, got shanked. He was stabbed in a federal prison in Arizona. They never stated who stabbed him, but Mr. Chauvin was seriously injured. It was pretty severe to where they were saying that the paramedics had came to where Mr. Chauvin was rushed to the hospital. And though the injuries were severe, they were saying that the injuries weren't life-threatening and that he's expected to survive. And though it was tragic, I think this incident was expected to happen because when Mr. Chauvin was kept in solitary confinement, his lawyer was worried about him being amongst a group of inmates who wasn't given any type of treatment because he knew that Derek Chauvin would be an easy target. And this happened while he's still serving his 22 and a half year sentence. It's probably 20 and a half now, since it's been 2 years since he's been convicted and sentenced. And not too long before the stabbing incident, it's been stated that he even tried to file an appeal against his conviction in state court, to where he was talking about how he didn't receive a fair trial, but the Supreme Court rejected Mr. Chauvin's appeal, and rightfully so. And by Mr. Chauvin already taking 2 L's, of course, you still got racist folks in America who are upset about it because they're feeling like Mr. Chauvin was only doing his job, and they would deny Mr. Chauvin's wrongdoing by stating that George Floyd died of fentanyl, a drug overdose, instead of calling out the obvious reason. And Mr. Chauvin is paying for his wrongdoings right now. He eventually got his karma, and I can't say that I feel bad for him getting stabbed, because I don't, not at all, because he's expected to survive from the incident, and if he does, at least he could still continue to serve those 22 years in prison, because this is a man who's a monster. He's the reason why the whole entire nation was living in fear for a couple of weeks back in June of 2020 with all the riots and gunshot. And he's the reason why businesses and stores were closed, and he had wood covering their windows and doors to keep out and prevent rioters and looters from breaking in. And he's the reason why some brothers, including myself, were paranoid whenever we were out driving and looked in our rearview mirrors and saw a police car behind us. It's all because of this man right here, Derek Chauvin. He killed George Floyd, and I felt that this stabbing was his karma, and the rejection of the appeal was his karma too. He got what he deserved. This dude is a murderer, and he's reaping what he sowed, because if you do something so fucked up, such as murdering a man on the streets while he's already on the ground, handcuffed, sooner or later, some type of bad karma is going to happen to you. And I was just thinking about that disturbing video of George Floyd, how one of the officers pointed a gun against Mr. Floyd's head. And George Floyd might have seemed like he was resisting arrest, to where he had a gun pointed at him while he was crying, begging, and fearing that the cops were going to shoot him, to where he was pulled out of his car and was handcuffed, refusing to get back of the police car, where they struggled to get him in. And he's telling Mr. Floyd to get in the car where the brother can't even move, where he ended up landed on the sidewalk. But see, the thing is, they already had him. He was already handcuffed, so there was no need for Mr. Chauvin to press his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck. They already had him. What could he do? He was already handcuffed. It wasn't like the Tyree Nichols situation, to where he fled or ran away from the scene, but they already had George on the ground, so he was already placed in a helpless situation. So what's the purpose of kneeling his neck and murdering him? It was fucked up. But see, Derek Chauvin, he's paying the price for it now, for Mr. Floyd's death. And Mr. Chauvin also did a similar act of police misconduct to a 14-year-old boy back in 2017, just 3 years before George Floyd. But fortunately, he didn't die, and he's about 20 years old now, I think. And just like the mayor of Minneapolis said, he said that if Mr. Chauvin was fired in 2017 for that incident with that 14-year-old boy, then George Floyd would still be here today. And people in this country have the constitutional rights to form a union, but it's funny because cops have unions too, but their union is bad, and they want to bust other unions. And cop union sucks, they the worst, but at the same time, they're probably the strongest union too, honestly. And Derek Chauvin was stabbed, and I don't think it's the stabbing alone that shocks people, because stuff like this happens all the time in prison. Because when you're surrounded around a bunch of criminals who's about their life, who lived a life of violence, who's being bunched and grouped up in a small area, there's going to be violence. So what did they expect? But I'm guessing because it's Derek Chauvin, a former cop, getting stabbed, the same officer who killed George Floyd, who's finally getting his karma, that's probably what makes it news. And Mr. Chauvin's appeal was denied by the judge when he already pleaded guilty to 2 federal civil rights charges. He thinking he could pull a Trump move. And I'm wondering, why does he want to be released anyway when the whole country hates him? there were riots and shit going on because of him. His wife already done divorced him, and he didn't want to deal with him and his racism. And I don't think George Floyd's family would be too thrilled if he was released. But I'm sure that there's racist whites out here who are upset that the judge rejected Derek Chauvin's appeal when they've all seen the George Floyd video. So why did they want him out? They've seen what Derek Chauvin did, so why else do they want him out? You know, this man should never see the light of day, and this man is a savage. He should never be let out, or he should have never been in the police force in the first place. They should have, they should never let him out of prison because he's a danger to society, and that's how some of these racist, crooked police officers get when they think they're above the law and don't want to hold any accountability. Because, like, what pisses me off about some of these racist conservatives is that they're making excuses for Derek Chauvin. They will blame drugs for George Floyd's death and would say that Derek Chauvin was just doing his job and he should have never been arrested and thrown in jail in the first place. And they're giving Mr. Chauvin a pass, saying that George Floyd died from drug overdose and his death wasn't a homicide. But was it the drugs that kneeled on Mr. Floyd's neck, or was it Mr. Chauvin's knee? See, they're so anti-black, they don't want to call out the obvious, because there's actually been proof from the medical examiner who performed the autopsy, who said that it was police pressure that took Mr. Floyd out, not the drugs. The pressure that Mr. Chauvin put on Mr. Floyd's neck, it was more than what he could take. And it's also been printed and stated that it was a lack of oxygen that killed George Floyd, not drugs. Yet racist conservatives would disagree. But I can guarantee you, if a black cop kneeled on a white man's neck, they wouldn't be saying that it was drugs that killed them. And I'm not generalizing, saying that this is all whites, because I know a lot of them who were pissed and livid when they saw the George Floyd video and blamed Officer Derek Chauvin. But there are some racist folks out there too who are blaming George Floyd and he was the victim. And I've heard folks, even the Attorney General in Minnesota, a black dude, Keith Ellison, saying he feels sorry for Derek Chauvin being stabbed and he shouldn't live in fear of retaliation. But I think that's easy to say when Derek Chauvin hasn't killed anyone in your family, because if somebody killed one of your family members and they're serving prison time, you would want them to receive the most cruelest, harshest prison sentence ever. But if you're talking about a murderer who didn't kill your family but happened to kill someone that you didn't know, then, you might be like, oh, well, they should be treated fair. We should protect criminals. And I'm not knocking that, because I can see the point folks make, because these criminals have already been punished. They've already been convicted and sentenced, doing time to where they're being told what to do, when to eat, when to sleep, when to do this and that. And they ain't never getting out no time soon. So, they're already in prison. And there's a lot of violence going on in these correction facilities where there's a lot of crazy shit going on. And because of that, a lot of folks feel that prisoners and inmates should be serving time and not having to deal with fear and retaliation and violence while they're serving time and the daily threat to their lives. But like I said, that's easy to say if they haven't done anything to any of your relatives or friends, because I don't think folks will feel that way about a prisoner who viciously murdered their mom or dad or husband or son or daughter. So it's difficult. And I mean, you don't really know until you actually experience the pain or it actually happens to you. Because when Derek Chauvin was sentenced, the first thought I had was whether Derek Chauvin should go out the same way he took out Mr. Floyd, by the knee of another prisoner, or should he get capital punishment, the death penalty. Because as I stated, it's easy to say no to that when it's a murderer who hasn't killed your family member. But I was wondering how, George Floyd family members might have felt about the death penalty. But Minnesota, it's not a death penalty state, I don't think. It doesn't have or practice the death penalty. And the worst that a murderer could get in Minnesota is life in prison. I felt that Derek Chauvin should have gotten life because he murdered someone in front of crowds of people on film. And during the trial, I was hoping for a punishment that was going to be, maximum that our laws would allow. Because at times, I think a criminal serving a life sentence could be better than the death penalty, so they could suffer slowly. Or at least they could serve 30 to 40 years, so by the time they get out, they're old men who can't do anything and life to pass them by. But other times I feel different. I feel that the death penalty is better, because a lot of times criminals that be in jail laughing, smiling, joking, and eating every day, they get to go and play basketball and all that shit when some of them don't even deserve to live after they caused a lot of pain in their victims' families' lives. So they shouldn't deserve to live either, because you want them to suffer. That's like a criminal, had broken someone's house and killed 4 kids and a husband and a wife. Instead of the criminal suffering 20 years, I don't see the problem with letting them suffer the first 6 months, then put them to death. But the thing about the death penalty is that it's controversial. A lot of people are against it because it's been proven that a lot of people have been found not guilty after death row put them to death. Because a lot of people have been put to death when they didn't do anything wrong. And when that happens, there's nothing that could be done. So the family had to sue because it ain't perfect. And that's why a lot of people are against it, because there's too many examples where a person on death row with an execution date, where something happens where they found not guilty, where they almost killed an innocent man. So the procedure ain't perfect. That's why a lot of people are against it. And I don't think they'll ever, it'll ever be removed, and it'll always be controversial in some way. But that's all I want to say, folks. This is Big Brother 749 signing out. I'm out. Peace.